Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Vijf Vragen, or 5 Questions, as we would say in English. This is our podcast featuring the people of the Netherlands' diplomatic network here in the U.S. We're talking with the diplomats and policy officers about the strong bonds between the United States and the Netherlands, as well as our diplomatic work here in the U.S. We're focusing on the collaborations between our two countries that make our relationship a partnership that works. I'm Jeff Allenak from the Embassy's Communications Office, and I'm talking with Taake Manning, the Embassy's Counselor for Innovation, Technology, and Science. Thank you for joining me today, Taake.
Hi, Jeff.
I asked you to join me today to talk about your work in the high-tech world. But before we find ourselves looking through the microscope of that discussion, I'd like to start with a more basic question. What's your background, and how'd you end up at the Embassy?
I studied applied mathematics and philosophy of science and technology back in the days. Mm-hmm. And after a short spell working as an IT consultant, I joined the government. And I've worked ever since in the nexus of policy and international cooperation in technology development. Mostly European work, of course, because that's the near abroad for the Netherlands, but also a lot outside of Europe with countries in Asia, as well as the US.
And that's how you got here?
And that's what I got here, yes.
Okay.
Almost 25 years experience in international technology cooperation.
Okay. What's a typical day like for the Dutch Counselor for Innovation, Technology, and Science?
Mostly it's shuffling papers, just like most people here at the Embassy.
A lot of paperwork?
A lot of paperwork. But my favorite part is when I get to go and visit companies and researchers, because I get a feeling for what is coming, what's cooking in all the labs, and what will be available for us as human beings 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
Do you get to play with any cool toys that we don't see yet? Maybe toys is too light of a term.
Sometimes. Occasionally I do. Mostly researchers don't trust us, external people, with their real nice toys. But there is that element, of course. It's expensive toys. But it's, in any case, really nice to get to see what is happening there. What medicines are being worked on to improve healthcare. New technologies for satellite communications, even smaller transistors for chips. You name it, it all comes by, and that is definitely my favorite part.
So is technology pretty broad? You mentioned gadgets, with the transistors. You mentioned medical technology. Is there any part of today's world that it doesn't touch?
No, really, there isn't. Technology is everywhere. Technology is in everything we use on a daily basis, and it's, I would say, the fundamental element of human society from the invention of fire onwards. Mm-hmm. And the Dutch are fortunate enough that as a country we have such a broad spectrum of really high quality research being done and innovation being done, that in many areas we are among the best in the world. You mentioned a fire. It's hard for me to imagine these days fire being considered a technology. But I guess I think it's more a discovery than a technology, perhaps. But actually learning how to make fire,
harnessing the power of fire. I guess that's where the technology would come in.
Exactly.
Can you name a technology or maybe an innovation that Americans use every day or at least familiar with that they don't realize is Dutch? Yes,
nice question. And yes, many of those.
Many.
I think one of the earliest inventions in modern times, at least, without going back all the way to fire, that are a Dutch invention, is the microscope.
Microscope?
Yes, so you're going back to the 1600s or so.
Okay.
It's a while, but that is definitely a Dutch invention. In more modern times, many of the tools that you see here in your phone, many of the features of it are Dutch inventions, or in any case, in part, Dutch inventions.
So we may not have a phone, an iPhone, or
Definitely not. Wi-Fi is a Dutch invention. Bluetooth is a Dutch invention. The very chips that are in your phone, those are not a Dutch invention. That's definitely an American invention.
Mm-hmm.
But the machines to make those chips come from Holland.
Okay. So without the machines to make the chips, there would be no chips.
There will be no modern chips, at least.
No modern chips. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say modern, what do you mean by, I mean, how modern? Are we talking, when I think modern chips, I would even go back to maybe the 50s, for example, but that's my own ignorance.
That would be the very first chip that you're talking about.
Okay.
Around 1950
so
or so.
Is that the great-grandfather of the chips in our phones today?
Yes, those were invented here in the US, in California. And the first 30-odd years, it was a technology that was mainly American.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say modern, I'm talking about the chips that have been designed and produced in the last 5 years to 10 years. So all the chips that AI runs on your iPhone or your personal computer nowadays are made with machines that only one Dutch company in the world can make. And that's ASML.
ASML, okay.
Not trying to make any ads here.
No, but it's. I don't know if the average American would be familiar with ASML. They might be. I can't speak for 350 million people, but speaking for myself, I don't think I was familiar with it before coming to work here. I never considered it like a consumer company where I would buy directly from ASML.
No, you wouldn't. Their machines tend to cost upwards of $100 million, so you would have to be a fairly rich individual.
That's a little out of my price range.
to have one of those, leaving aside what you would do with it.
I don't know what. I don't know what I would do with it.
The products that they make are used to make consumer products that are everywhere, in TVs, in your phone, your computer.
Yeah. You mentioned AI a few minutes ago, AI in terms of making chips, I think.
Yes.
We hear a lot about AI these days. What's both governments' role, the United States and the Netherlands, in ensuring the technology does not cause more harm than good? I see that on both sides, taking away jobs or making jobs easier.
Yeah, there's both elements to it, of course. And, up to now, I would say that all technologies that we have invented, while they may have displaced workers in first instance, they have created new jobs. A lot of people who used to light gas lights at night went out of work when electricity was invented. But you don't see anybody of them still having a trouble integrating in the work market today.
So these were people, forgive my ignorance, these were people who were to go around that street lights and...
Yes.
And physically light them?
Yes. Once upon a time, that's the way it worked.
Okay.
And then electricity came by and you could just flick a switch somewhere.
So I can imagine the conversation being back then, they're going to take away our jobs.
Indeed, it was.
Yeah.
And the same is true for steam power. Technology changes the world, of course, and it changes our world as human beings. But it doesn't necessarily mean that technology displaces people for good. Mm-hmm. It just means that human beings can do things where human beings are better than a machine. And the same is true in my mind for artificial intelligence.
Okay.
We were talking about shuffling paperwork just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
A lot of that is fairly tedious work, but it needs to be done.
Right.
The question is whether it necessarily needs to be done by a human being.
Could AI then do that?
Not at the moment.
Right.
But look at what algorithms like ChatGPT can do.
Yeah.
Just to mention a famous one.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it to write a letter for you. You can get it to write a report for you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend, a Dutch entrepreneur in China. He's a bit of a technology geek, and he has set up a system of various AI tools that he uses. One tool to record his meetings and translate those into text.
Okay.
So voice to text, basically. That's fairly straightforward, right? Then he uses another tool to make a summary of it and come up with all the action points. Another tool that he has trained with all the documents that his company has produced over the last 10 years, all the presentations, reports, you name it, are in there. And so you can ask that tool to make proposition for a client he has just spoken to. And he can generate slide decks based on all the slide decks that are already in there to suit that proposition. So instead of having a team of 3 or 4 people working for days to produce this proposition and a slide deck, it can be done within, let's say, hours by one person. Still, of course, it still needs to be checked. It still needs to be fine-tuned.
Right.
But it's a lot easier to fine-tune something that is already there rather than to have to come up with it all by yourself.
From scratch.
From scratch, indeed. And it also has an added benefit because it trawls through everything that a company has ever produced. It regularly, he tells me at least, comes up with ideas that human beings would probably not have come up with because they are they come from a totally different sector, for instance, or a totally different application that the company has worked on in the past. So it actually can even help to reduce the inherent bias that people carry with them. And you were asking what is the role of government in ensuring that a technology like AI does more good than bad. I think there is definitely a role there in making sure that technology like AI can be used safely. And that it can be used with a certain degree of protection of privacy and of elimination of bias.
Okay. So would that be like, we hear a lot about deep fakes with the election cycle, especially with the fear that somebody might make a video of a candidate saying something that they never said, and all of a sudden it goes viral, and there's little recourse.
Forget the video.
Forget the video. Audio.
Yes, audio is a lot harder to check, and it's at least as easy to get hold of.
Is that because there's so much? These people talk in the public so much that it's just there?
Yeah, and an AI-generated video. Generally speaking, there's always something that happens in that video that you can pinpoint to see that it's a fake.
Okay.
Somebody that all of a sudden has six fingers rather than 5.
I've seen some photos. Yeah.
You've seen the photos.
Yeah.
There will be something at some stage during that video that raises alarms.
Yeah.
Audio is a lot harder, especially if it's taken from original words being spoken.
Is this then vastly different from somebody editing parts of a speech and like taking out a recorded speech, for example, and taking out the word "not" and making it sound like you said something that you didn't say?
It's in the same category, except that audio will convince an awful lot more people than a written text.
Audio will, yeah.
Yes, because you've heard it. You've heard the person saying it.
Is there a way then is there a role that governments can play to stop that from happening? Can they force, for example, regulations that say this has to be labeled as AI or fake or something? Or
yeah, that kind of regulation you could think of. Obviously, people who really want to do wrong, they will still be able to do so.
Of course, yeah.
The difficult thing is how to trace it. I don't have an answer, to be honest, Jeff. What I could think is some form of fingerprinting, watermarking of audio files that are made in a genuine way, to be able to differentiate them from the deep fakes. But I don't.
Who knows?
Really have an answer.
It reminds me of a movie long ago that I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was stealing art, and one of the people who investigated it said, "Well, what are the borders look like?" I think it was the borders. You take the frame off of the art, and if the forger had seen the original. Didn't see the original piece, they couldn't have faked that because it wasn't visible. So it sounds like that's kind of what along the lines of what you're talking about.
Something like that.
But as you say, somebody who wants to ignore the regulations will get around it, but will not get around it, but will ignore it anyway, because it's already unethical to do that.
Yeah, it's already unethical to produce deepfakes. In for that kind of purpose, at least.
I think most people would agree with that. What's the biggest technological challenge facing America today, and how is the Dutch government helping to address it?
Yeah,
or we can even broaden that to anybody. The biggest technological is AI the biggest technological challenge?
No, I don't think that AI is the biggest technological challenge. Figuring out ways of processing a lot of information, a lot of tokens, is something that we are getting good at and getting better at by the day. Mm-hmm. I think there are two elements that are important to keep in mind as a challenge. One is access to talent.
I'm sorry?
Access to talent.
Oh, access to talent. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah.
In a world where talent is getting ever more scarce, it becomes a question of how you find it, how you retain it.
Is that because people aren't going into the fields, or is it they are not paid enough, or some companies can pay so much that they get all the talent, so they sort of hog it all? Is that
all of the above?
Is that right?
Yes, it's all of the above. It's the US are fortunate that that you have a tradition of immigration and of making sure that you get very highly qualified people from abroad. If you look at the biggest companies in the US at the moment, many of them are set up or partly set up, co-set up by foreigners or non-US born people. Think of Tesla, think of companies like Meta and Google and so on, PayPal. And you have the ability to retain that talent. That is, I think, a big advantage that the US has over Europe, for instance. And even so, there is a huge shortage of people at all levels, not only the PhDs and the masters, but even at the more operational level, people who have the skills to work in the various high-tech industries that there are and the industries of tomorrow. And it's also a question of scarcity worldwide. We have negative replacement rates. Our birth rates are below replacement in the US.
I've read stories about that a lot of the industrial nations have that problem. That
indeed. Even the richer parts of India nowadays have that. And outside of the African continent, there are practically no countries in the world that have a birth rate that is above replacement rate. So, in the coming 50 years or so, talent will become harder to find for everyone. So that's one challenge. To which AI, by the way, can be part of the answer.
I've heard you can train, or a lot of software can be written by AI if they already know how to do it. So the person doesn't have to know the software, but it can say, make me a program that'll do 1, 2, and 3, and then AI will go and do it.
You can do that. You still need a human in the loop somewhere to make sure that it.
I would hope so.
Is correct.
Yeah.
But yes, that kind of tool exists. Code generation is a thing. The other challenge that I would want to mention is moving towards a more sustainable path. In terms of economy. To come back to AI, it is consuming an ever greater amount of energy.
It is, yeah.
I believe that at the moment, the amount of energy that AI uses is bigger than the amount of energy consumed by the airlines.
By the around the whole world. Is that right?
Yeah. And whereas aviation is going to remain relatively stable in terms of consumption.
Yeah. Might even go down with the replacement, as you say, population.
Indeed. The energy used by AI will only increase.
It even hits neighborhoods. In where I live, there's a planned, or proposed, I should say, transmission line that's going to go to Northern Virginia, and it goes right right by the back of our neighborhood. And there are a lot of people in the neighborhood who are trying to fight it because they say, well, it doesn't even benefit us because it's going to be data farms that's fueling AI. Now, this is from the flyers that I receive in our mailboxes. I wouldn't speak to the veracity of it or not. I don't know, but it definitely is hitting neighborhoods now.
Yeah, whether those transmissions lines are actually destined for a data server, a data center, I do not know.
Right.
But it is certainly true that we are consuming ever greater amounts of energy, also for AI, and that will need to be generated somehow. So, finding technologies that can do that without hurting the environment.
Yeah.
Generating that energy in a way that is more sustainable, but also making sure that whatever we use consumes less energy.
Yeah, so it's more efficient.
It's more efficient. Yes, that's the energy part. But there's an awful lot more. I mean, even if you look at your iPhone. There's a lot of nasty chemicals that are used to produce it.
And a lot of precious metals that go into it, I hear.
A lot of precious metals, but also compounds like PFAS, for instance. A lot of water is used to manufacture semiconductors. We have to find ways of doing that in a more sustainable way.
Are there companies really striving to do that, or is it a huge challenge that nobody's figured out how to crack yet?
It is not one challenge. It is a multitude of smaller challenges, and each solution to one challenge will undoubtedly generate new problems.
Another one, yeah. Solve one problem, you create two more.
Exactly, yeah. But it's actually sustainability in the semiconductor industry is one of the topics that we definitely seek bilateral cooperation on between the US and the Netherlands. And in particular with New York State. We signed an MOU with New York State a couple of months ago.
And an MOU is?
A memorandum of understanding. It doesn't say much more than that we want to work together in this area, and the rest still has to be worked out.
So it's not necessarily a contract. It's just sort of putting on paper, hey, we want to work with you.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And we actually really do want to work together in this area. So we started out with summer schools for researchers and PhD students from New York State. They went to Eindhoven last summer. That's just a start, and we want to expand on that. We want to generate joint projects to solve some of these problems.
Well, maybe someday we'll have iPhones that are powered by completely sustainable energy and has nothing that is harmful in it.
I join you in that hope.
Just one final question for you, Taake. Have you ever found yourself at the losing end of high-tech innovation?
At the losing end of a high-tech?
That's a pretty open-ended question, I realize, but I always try to ask an open-ended question at the end there.
That's a good one. I'm not sure whether it's on a specific innovation, but you know what?
What's that?
I've reached the age where when there's an issue with a technology product at home, whether it's our game console or the television, my son looks at me full of impatience and says, "Dad, let me do that." Does that count?
Well, maybe it's not necessarily a bad one. It reminds me of the back in the 80s and 90s, the people who never figured out how to program their VCR. So it always flashed a time, and they never worried about it. And it was always the young kid who knew how to fix it, and the parents are just like, whatever, I don't use it to tell time anyway.
And, exactly.
It's funny how it's funny how that shift happens so slowly. But when it happens, you don't realize it does. And then you look, and then when you realize it, when did I get so old? When did that happen?
Yeah. I think at a certain point, look at myself personally, in any case, I just lost interest in figuring out all the details of these products. So as long as I can operate it for the things that I want to do with it, I'm fine. But then inevitably there's a moment that I hear, Dad,
So for Father's Day next year, maybe your son's just going to give you a phone with 9 big buttons, right?
I hope he waits for another few years, actually.
Little age-proof phone there, huh? I think we're all headed that direction one way or another. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you again, Taake, for joining me for this episode of Vijf Vragen. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please tell us what you think in the comments below, and be sure to click on the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode or the other videos we post on our YouTube channel. I'll be back behind the microphone next month with another member of the Dutch Diplomatic Network in the United States. Until then, you can keep up with our work on any of our social media channels: Facebook, X, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Just search for NL in the USA, and you can stay up to date on how the United States and the Netherlands have a partnership that works.